Would you recognize immortality if it knocked on your door, gentlemen?
Obviously you wouldn't, but that's beside the point. I want this swamp thing, and I want the notebook. Now.
Don't worry, I'll get rid of him.
You will not get rid of him. You will simply get him. Pure elements of the formula that determines him are there, in its veins.
But how can we find it? It's gone into the swamps.
Every time you've seen the girl, you've seen the beast, right?
That's right.
Then we'll find the girl, the beast will follow. It doesn't exactly maintain a low profile.
Holland insisted on building it all out here. He said this is where the life is. One of those life forms nailed the guy you're replacing.
Alice Cable, new kid on the block.
I am very close to developing a plant with an animal's aggressive power for survival.
No, there's over 100 species of Anton Arcane here. So much beauty in the swamps if you just open up your eyes to it.
It's replicating like mad.
It certainly is. Oh my God.
Somebody's heard Arcane's gotten wind of the project.
I thought Arcane was dead.
What the hell do you want?
All materials pertaining to the substance now.
Uh-huh. Here comes trouble.
No bodies. No witnesses.
Something incredible came out of the swamps. Some of the men say it's one of those abdominal snowballs.
Got the last notebook.
We got him cornered.
It only amplifies your essence.
Uh-huh.
Swamp Thing made his debut in a standalone story in House of Secrets number 92 in July of 1971. Created by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson, Swamp Thing would eventually be incorporated into DC Comics continuity, where he would star in his own title. Brilliant scientist Alec Holland is working in the Louisiana swamps on a top-secret formula that is meant to grow plant life in any environment. Holland is exposed to the formula and presumably killed. Of course, Holland isn't really dead, but he mutates into the vegetable-like creature Swamp Thing. His most popular adversary in his early stories is the rich and powerful Dr. Anton Arcane, who is obsessed with gaining immortality. Swampy would eventually develop a connection to Arcane's niece, Abigail Arcane, while his former friend, Matthew Cable, a federal agent, blamed Swampy for the death of Alec and his wife, Linda Holland. While Swamp Thing was spooking readers, the up-and-coming director Wes Craven was scaring movie audiences with his audacious horror films, like Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes. While popular, turning a hefty profit, and both being fit for remake status 30 years later, these early efforts didn't elevate Craven to being a A-list director. So, wanting to prove he could handle a bigger budget and make a more mainstream, crowd-pleasing film, in 1982, Craven attempted to bring Swamp Thing to movie screens. Swamp Thing the film implemented some alterations and blending of characters for its story, but it pretty much maintained the main idea of the good-hearted scientist who's turned into a humanized plant that roams the swamps. A very likable Ray Wise plays Holland, who's hard at work creating his top-secret formula with his sister deep in the Louisiana swamp. After the death of one of Holland's team members, apparently from an alligator attack, government agent Alice Cable arrives as his replacement. Cable seems to bring some luck, as Holland makes a breakthrough and his formula is a success. Unfortunately, Dr. Anton Arcane, being the bad guy that he is, has his private mercenary force overtake the lab, kill all the workers, and force Holland to hand over the notebooks with his secret formula. Then, darn it all, Holland is exposed to the formula. Cable survives, taking the final notebook with her, and Arcane is on the hunt to find her, when suddenly his men start encountering a strange creature in the swamps. I always found Swamp Thing a very entertaining film. This was the perfect film for 12-year-olds back in 1982. It pretty much has all the requirements that would make kids say, cool, while watching it. It's kind of spooky, it's a very straightforward story, you got lots of bad guys with guns, monster attacks, a creepy music score, a funny kid looking on, and Adrienne Barbeau in nicely fitted t-shirts running around. I mean, what's not to like? It plays like one of those old-fashioned monster movies, almost like an updated version of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. The film might have had a bigger budget than Craven was used to at the time, but it was still pretty sparse for the action and makeup the movie required. Like, it's clear Swamp Thing is just a guy in a green rubber suit. But despite the lack of cash, Craven does manage to make the action entertaining. Which is a plus, since the film is mainly a merry-go-round of scenes that consist of Barbeau being chased, Barbeau getting caught, Barbeau escaping, and Swamp Thing killing some bad guys. Then it starts all over again. Louis Jourdain's Arcane is a sophisticated, smooth-talking villain. It's from the same mold as his Kamal Khan he did in Octopussy the following year. He's got all these great, overly dramatic lines of dialogue, and he says them all with real relish.
This thing has considerable intelligence. He's like a brilliant chess player. He anticipates every move. A strong adversary is like a beautiful, dangerous woman. I've never been able to resist either. Tell the captain to weigh anchor.
I love how he's got all these hot chicks walking around his estate, too. They're just hanging on his every word.
And in your hands, sir, how magnificent, how beautiful.
Yes.
The world will bow or starve.
Yes. Yes.
Now that's a superpower. David Hess makes Ferret, the head mercenary, a real obnoxious, evil jerk. I was really waiting for this tough guy to get his ass handed to him.
Well, it's right into our hands, didn't you? Real smart.
Thanks. I knew we couldn't rely on your intelligence.
The one guy on the Arcane team who seems to have the slightest bit of humanity is Bruno, who's played by Nicholas Worth. He does redeem himself in the end by helping Swampy, but by then he still gets made into a twerp of a monster. It's kind of funny how Bruno's clothes shrink, too. Now the little Bruno's wearing a comfortable-looking turtleneck. All the rest of Arcane's crew are the standard disposable bad guys, though. See, we know they're really rotten guys because they're laughing at poor Cable drowning. Ho 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 ho. The film actually manages to bring some real humanity to Swamp Thing. The Holland character doesn't simply disappear, but we're reminded he's somewhere in this thing, thanks to the quiet scenes between him and Alice. For some reason, those scenes work much better than I would have expected. And I think it's mainly due to the performances of Dick Durock as Swampy and Barbeau. Swamp Thing even takes a moment and lovingly gazes at the topless Barbeau in the uncut version. See, he's a real guy.
What about that sensor out in Sector 3?
Right, get somebody to take you out there and take a look.
Me? In the swamps?
This was Adrienne Barbeau in her prime. She's tough and looks good, and she handles the action really well. After a string of parts in a bunch of John Carpenter films, who was her husband at the time, along with her role as Alice Cable, it helped cement her status as the hottest, most endowed queen of cult movies in the 80s. Well, her along with Sybil Danning.
You don't like me, do you?
The one thing about Alice is that sometimes she's really tough, while other times she becomes a regular damsel in distress and needs saving. I would still like to know what kind of government agent Alice is supposed to be, though. That part is left kind of vague. Then we have the cool Jude, who is great with his deadpan expressions. He's pretty amusing and really lightens things up. I wonder whatever happened to this kid. I don't think I've ever seen him again. By the end, Swampy and Alice are captured, and Arcane gets what's coming to him.
But if the essence is, let us say, genius, then this genius shall be monumental in body as well as in spirit. Is that what you're saying?
Ah, the smell of arrogance. Again, the lack of cash for decent monster makeup really shows, so the final showdown looks less like an epic clash between two monsters, and more like two guys in cheap Halloween costumes flailing their arms at each other. With these scenes, Craven would have benefited with some more money, had he had it. Swamp Thing didn't help propel Craven's status in Hollywood. That would come a couple years later when Nightmare on Elm Street would make him one of the most popular and successful directors in the horror genre. Thanks to the film, the character enjoyed a revival in comics, especially by Alan Moore, who revamped the origins of Swamp Thing and his mythology. Swamp Thing would return in a movie sequel in 1989, and subsequently he would star in his own live-action TV series that lasted for 3 seasons. Plus, he had his own cartoon. Still, I think overall, Swamp Thing is an entertaining flick. For some reason, I don't think I should enjoy it as much as I do. It's not a great movie, but it's a fun one.
Where's Danny? Where's Willie?
Maybe Willie's with Tyrone.
Danny shot Tyrone.
Oh, yeah.
It managed to entertain millions of adolescents when it started showing up on cable all the time. I think that's where the majority of that early audience first saw it. To this day, when rewatching it, that wide-eyed little kid in me is still amused seeing Swamp Thing throw the bad guys around. We get a Wilhelm scream out of that bad guy. There's some creepy-looking scenes that I thought were horrifying when I was little. Now they look hokey, but for a PG-rated film at the time, it had kids running for cover under their beds, and then running right back to check out Barbeau's chest. It was a perfect fit for cable at the time. Monsters, action, boobs. No wonder kids kept tuning in to watch it.
Why doesn't Bruno there have your strength?
Because he never had it.